It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Sean Taylor. Sean is founder and chief executive officer of Up to Par Management and Taylor Hospitality. He is a dedicated resort operations leader and PGA member with more than 20 years of experience. He has a clear understanding that service is the cornerstone of club and resort operations, and his leadership philosophy is centered on exceeding the needs of the guests and members while driving superior financial performance. He founded Taylor Hospitality and Up to Par Management after identifying a market need for solutions-oriented business practices. Sean focuses on optimizing property-wide processes with Six Sigma initiatives, as well as enhancing associate engagement through management training programs. Sean Taylor, welcome into the corner office.
Well, thanks, Brent. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk and talk about our organization and some of the questions that you may have.
I'm looking forward to it. Well, I'd like to kind of start with the early years. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up. I know golf's been a big part of your life. Was that something the family was involved with, or how did you get into the sport?
Fairly odd. Grew up in New Jersey, and actually I was the only one in my entire family that played golf. So
really,
ran and played golf, and not too many great golfers have come out of New Jersey. So
you're the exception.
I quickly knew that if I wanted to get better, I needed to go south, and went to school down in North Carolina, a little school called Elon. Played for them collegiately, and upon graduation, played professionally for a couple of years. And actually, all through that time, really was involved not only in golf but also in hospitality, running. As far as food and beverage,
great industry to be
aspect.
Of
things.
Great industry to be in. Absolutely. Yep. Brothers and sisters, mom and dad. What? Tell me a little bit about your early family life.
I had three older brothers. All are uber successful in their own chosen careers, and mom and dad are still with us, which is great. Retired. They're up in Delaware. My brothers are really sporadic throughout the country. One is down in South Florida, has his own business down there in Southern Florida. Another had his own business in Annapolis, did artificial intelligence, and then another one of my other brothers, my oldest brother, is up there in Delaware as well, and he does research, heart disease, and
wow, you guys are all over the place.
Yeah, all over the place with different interests, and they all have their PhD. I say, I got three brothers with their PhDs, and I'm the only ones who didn't go and pursue a PhD in our family. So kind of crazy that way.
Mom and dad professionals as well?
They are teachers. They were teachers.
Okay,
yes,
got it.
Both of them were high school and college professors, and obviously growing up, education was always placed at a premium with us in our household, and that was kind of the gateway.
Student?
Okay.
Yeah, you can have some fun. I love it.
Okay. I think I learned more when I started the company than I ever did in college. So.
There you go. All right. Well, there's lots of different ways to learn. What about early inspirations? Did you have a golf coach or a teacher or folks that, gave you some words of wisdom in those early years?
Yeah, I had, some great golf instructors. My coach in college, college was he was also the basketball coach at Elon. So we always got the rah-rah speech at the turn at the end of the 9 holes. So because we knew we had the second half to play. So really had some really good people that I looked up to. There were mentors towards me. Obviously, my parents, my dad was somebody that I always placed on a pedestal. And then people within.
What are some of the early lessons from Dad? Do you remember some words of wisdom when you were young?
Oh boy, if you don't do it right, don't do it at all. That was definitely something that you can continually learn and get better. Where you are today is not going to be where you're going to be tomorrow.
Right.
So those were always things that that he instilled with us. I think overall he probably instilled such an incredible work ethic for not only for me, for my brothers. At one point, both my parents were high school teachers, and at one point, he had 5 of us in college.
Oh my gosh!
So he was working three jobs, and we saw it growing up, and just the work ethic, and then obviously starting your own venture. Sleep is optional, and so no doubt about it. I think that work ethic and that mentality of really kind of just getting your nose to the grindstone and getting it done. Really, he passed that along to us, and really grateful for that.
Awesome. And what about Mom?
She was also a high school teacher. She taught business.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So, very early on, this is back in the 80s. Oh my gosh, before the internet, and we learned how to type and learned how to keep books and
good skills to have.
Probably the accounting aspect of things and the communication aspect of things still pay dividends to today, and really hard worker as well. And really probably from with her, I mean, she was, we're mostly Italian, and food is a way of life in the Italian family, and that's probably where we, from a hospitality perspective of things, growing up in the kitchen and taking what we were able to pull out from the garden and and put it out there on, literally back in the day, it wasn't so passe to be farm to table, but that's what we did, and that's how we grew up. And we took the ingredients that we had in the back in the garden and put it there on the table. And so that probably drives a portion of our culture at Up to Par and Taylor Hospitality.
Awesome. So golf was a big part of your life. Any other sports or music, theater, politics, other things you get involved with?
Well, golf and running. Ran cross country and track, and played golf when it was the golf season, and really had to get to the point where I got recruited to either play golf or run.
Right.
And I chose the golf was really making such a strong surge, and I chose the golf part of things, and I know my waistline wishes I probably chose the running part of running,
particularly with the
things.
Food combination in there.
No doubt about it. My son and my daughter run, which is good. So I'm living my life vicariously through them with their running. Awesome. So kind of neat.
Any entrepreneurial things you're involved with when you're growing up? The ubiquitous paper route or selling Christmas cards or other stuff to earn pocket money?
Wow. So yes and yes and yes. So yes, had a paper route. Would get up 5 o'clock in the morning and deliver to approximately about 100 families around our neighborhood.
Yeah.
Pretty proud of that in the sense of kind of started off with 60 families and grew that to over 100, which was kind of neat.
Nice.
And then really from there, always had jobs growing up, whether it was picking up range balls and working at a driving range facility or working at a golf course or at one point in my college career when I was in college, I was a junior optician making eyeglasses,
Oh,
and
wow.
or working at a liquor store. Worked for a family in New Jersey that owned a liquor store, and so essentially that's how I got to learn all about the liquor business,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
different wines and liquors. So always had a job, but obviously on the entrepreneurial side, the paper route really kind of sticks out like a sore thumb.
sure. It's funny. So many of our CEOs have done that same thing.
Yeah.
In fact, a couple of the female CEOs were actually folding the papers for their brothers,
Oh my
but also
gosh, how
up at
good is
4
that?
a.m. in the morning.
That is
But
great.
yeah, there's nothing like having that responsibility early and, getting good customer service experience that kind of forms you in your mind. Hey, this work is good. You like
Yep.
picking up that paycheck. What'd you do with that pocket money? Was it putting it away for college? I guess with all the brothers you had, that was probably something that was needed, or did you have some favorite things that you spent your pocket money on during those years?
No. It was
It's all
times
savings.
were very lean.
Yeah, yeah,
So actually the pocket money was whether it's if I wanted to buy golf balls
right,
or
right.
if I wanted to buy a new club or something along those lines, or honestly just I can remember going to a public golf course that was a municipal golf course growing up, and if I got there before 7 a.m., it was $3, and if I got there after 7 a.m., it was $5. And I can always remember going to the golf club every day with $5 in my pocket, $3 for all day greens fees. And I had
Yep,
my shag bags and hit golf balls, and then $2 for a pork roll and cheese sandwich,
there you go.
and as well as and then also like a Coke, and then that was it. That was
That was
my,
it. That was your day.
right. And so, and then at night I would go and work at a driving range, and the driving range was lit, so I didn't get out of there till about 12 o'clock at night,
Wow,
and
wow.
wound up getting home and then turning right around trying to get to the golf course before 7 a.m.
Long days, but it's
Oh, fun days
obviously
though.
fun
It
days.
makes you who
Yeah, a
you
lot of
are though.
practice in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, are you recruited, Elon? Did you play golf there
I did.
in
Yep.
college?
Yep.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Played well
Awesome.
enough in high school golf to where they were one of the few schools that actually, gave us some scholarship money.
That's great.
And while I absolutely wanted to go to Carolina, University of North Carolina, it wasn't in the cards at that time, and they were given some money. My dad, with four other of us, said that's where you're going, and so the decision was made, and that's
Case was
where
made.
the
Right.
case was made. And actually, the Carolina coach really he didn't want me as well, so that's maybe what drives me for my disdain for University of North Carolina.
And then you ended up at Duke as a professional there, but we'll
That's
get to
right.
that in a minute.
That's right. So the big
It
guy
all worked
upstairs,
out.
yeah, he's got a plan for all of us,
I
so
love it. I love it. How'd you decide what to study in college?
originally I liked math a
Hmm.
lot.
Kind of mom's influence because of the
Yeah,
accounting
yeah,
background. Yeah, yeah.
I really enjoyed math quite a bit. And when you play college sports, this is probably one thing that most of the announcers just don't just take for given anymore, is you miss so much school. And golf is really one of the sports where you probably miss more school than
Really.
most. Yeah.
Yeah.
So on
Long
average, I was
days,
missing
lots of
about,
practice. Yeah.
yeah, 30. Well, because they're tournaments, they're not like
Right.
a game where you go on
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
day, you're going for three days. And so
Right.
so on average a semester, I would miss anywhere between 35 and 40 days a
Wow.
semester.
That's a lot.
And so
Yeah.
at that time, it was definitely a lot different. Uh, Trying to teach yourself calculus 3 was
Hmm.
incredibly challenging. So I had to change my
Can't even
major
imagine.
from, yeah,
Yeah.
from math to something else. And I've always enjoyed history, but I always enjoyed teaching. And I wound up taking a lot of classes and wound up double majoring as a major in history, major in education, had a minor in philosophy,
Hmm.
religion, and then also I took enough math to have a minor in mathematics as well. So kind of
Awesome.
crazy that way.
Yeah.
Um, I actually don't use a lick of any of it.
I was going to say, what was that first job out of college? You become an esthetician or something, or
right, and
where'd you
definitely
go?
didn't use any of it. It's probably one of my, looking back, I probably could have been a lot more strategic with the direction that I thought I was going to wanted to
Yeah,
teach in school, and I did my student teaching and realized I do not want to do this.
right,
So
right.
decided, to go and, just get my degree and then try to figure it out.
So did you go first to Duke? Was that your first job, straight out?
No, I was down. I played professionally
Okay,
for a
great.
couple of years, and
Yeah,
then I worked at a facility down in Hilton Head, South Carolina.
nice.
And then while I was working there, we started to build an additional 9 holes. So I got the opportunity to work on the construction
Oh,
side of
fun.
golf.
Yeah.
And then when I took the position at Duke, we were getting ready to go under reconstruction of the entire facility, and you had your choice: could you work inside and have limited hours, or could you go outside and work golf course construction? And I chose the
Mm,
latter.
nice.
So for a year, I worked really alongside with Reese Jones, who's a kind of a famous golf
Sure.
architect.
Right.
And then we wound up doing golf course construction, and then was at Duke, wound up running the Duke University operation for 13 years. Worked
Wow.
as an employee of Duke Athletics, and
Right.
and
So
have still
were you the coach, or were you
no, I
working more
ran
in
the
admin
golf
side?
operation.
The golf operations. Got it.
Yeah,
So what
we
did that
had
include?
coaches. Yeah, so we had coaches, a men's coach and a ladies coach, and
Right.
we worked we worked with them. It was, making sure that we had a facility that they could play on, and then recruit their players. And the golf course itself actually was the third largest profit center
Wow.
for Duke Athletics.
Huh.
So you had men's basketball, you actually had men's football, men's basketball, and
Right.
then it was us. And then we wound up funding, I think, about 4 non-revenue sports
Wow.
for
Cool.
athletics at the time.
Yeah.
So the coaches always wanted to know how we were doing it there at the golf course. Were we busy,
Yeah.
not busy? And it was an absolute. I'll tell you, it was a fabulous environment. It was just an environment where you're with the best coaches and best professionals across the country. It was just really just reeked of
Great school.
excellence.
Yeah. A wonderful school as
And it's
well.
just a lot of good people that have come and
Yeah.
gone through the athletic department there, which was, and it made it a lot of fun as well. So it was a lot of fun to come to work
Did
for.
you have some leadership responsibilities early on there?
Well, I had was responsible for the operations there,
Right.
so oversaw the what was happening out there on the golf course. So
Got it.
yes, um, I got to participate every Monday. We would go, all the coaches would get together, and we had, it was kind of different. And we had our staff meeting, and
Yeah.
I would sit there with all the with all of the coaches from all the variety of schools, sports, and
Yeah.
it was good. It was,
Yeah.
very, very. It was definitely learned a lot.
Sean, tell me about the first time you started managing people. When was that, and how was that a challenge for you?
Let's see. It would probably go back to, my times that I back in Hilton Head.
Mm-hmm.
Had a
Mm-hmm.
relatively small crew or team that I was responsible for their performance, and then obviously there at Duke, I had a fair amount of responsibility for the team that was there.
Right.
I think one of the benefits that I have had is that I've always looked at managing like coaching because I was forced to.
Right.
When you're in an athletic environment, everything becomes very much a coaching scenario.
Mm.
And so very early on with that, you're you the coaches are judged from their team's performance, and you as a leader or you as a manager are directly judged how well your team performs.
Right.
And I always say that you're hired from the people above, but you're fired from the people below. And
That's so true.
and so it really makes you know, growing up, being in that environment, listen to the words of wisdoms and nuggets, whether it's, from Coach K or from the golf coaches that were there, or all the successful, national championship coaches that were there at Duke. You just sat there, and as a young man, and I just soaked it up. And I tried to use as much as I learned from there as I possibly could, and helping our teams perform better.
That's awesome. Awesome. So Uptomar, you've been in Uptomar management, gosh, for over 10 years now. Now, is that a company that you founded?
I did. Yep.
So tell
absolutely.
me a little bit about the path to that, because you were an employee, obviously, at a couple different places. I know you were at Grand Cypress and Wintergreen Resort. Tell me how you kind of evolved to setting up Uptomar.
So really neat. So when I was there at the Duke University Golf Club, essentially got recruited to come down and run all of golf operations and head up quality for Grand Cypress Resort down in Orlando. Fabulous place, beautiful golf resort, one of the best within the country. I had 125 PGA Tour members that were members of the property. So, the cream of the crop, any day you'd have Ernie Els, Mark O'Meara, Tiger Woods, any of those guys would walk in through the door.
Awesome.
And would wound up playing or practicing, because they all lived right there in Orlando.
Right.
And then from there, wife and I, we had boy-girl twins, and it was very much, it was a Jack Nicklaus property, and right down the road, there's another property called Bay Hill, where it's Arnold Palmer, and who owns Arnold Palmer, and actually used to give Mr. Palmer's grandson golf lessons when I was there at Duke. And actually when I was in South Carolina, Hilton Head, that's the first time I met Mr. Palmer. I caddied for him at a golf course that he opened. And we strung up kind of a neat relationship over the course of my lifetime, and so I wound up living there in Bay Hill, and right down the street from Mr. Palmer, and he invited every Saturday I would tee it up with him, which was fantastic. So from an overall perspective, gosh almighty, we loved that part of it. But to raise a family in Orlando we just could not see that happening. It was so transient, such a transient environment. Not to say that you couldn't, but it would have been it was not something that neither my wife, who's from the Midwest, or myself kind of were comfortable with. So we get recruited to come and run all of spring, summer, fall business up in Charlottesville, a place called Wintergreen. And it was unequivocally probably one of the tougher places I've ever been employed at. The culture was very challenging as an organization. And then unfortunately, it was a ski resort in the Southeast.
Wow. So, I didn't think there were any of those.
So those two don't go hand in hand very well.
Not necessarily.
So,
wow.
The first, and this is probably the driving reason how I started our company. I can remember driving up the mountain, and it was on Martin Luther King Day, and driving up next to one of the slopes and not seeing a stitch of snow on the mountain. And I'm thinking, oh God, this is just not good. And so at the time, our chairman of the board, he came to me, and we had to make some significant operational cuts. And so I had, ski season at this resort was roughly about an 8-week window, and I had the other 44 weeks of the year that I had the responsibility for. And he came to me and he said, you need to find 600,000 out of your operating.
Oh.
And I said, okay, obviously with that big of a number, it's a head count. And that while as tough as that was, I can remember sitting around our senior team and looking at it and saying, is that the right number? Are we going to have to come back and do this again? And we're like, well, let's just get through this year. And I really did not ultimately agree with that decision at that time. And because I felt like we needed to make deeper cuts in case we had the same winter
Sure.
again.
Right.
And so we made the 600,000, and frankly, they weren't as hard as the making it out, because you did eliminate positions, you eliminated a lot of your headaches, people that you didn't enjoy working with.
Right.
So the next year, same scenario, driving up,
snow.
driving up Martin Luther King. Not a real big fan of Martin Luther King for different reasons, and they came back and said you need to find another 500,000 out of your operating.
Goodness gracious.
And at that time, I knew it was a significant headcount again, but my heart went out for all the people who gave it their all.
Yeah.
All the ones that gutted it out, that took the pay cuts,
that stayed on, were loyal.
that did all of that, and I knew all the stories. I knew the maintenance guy whose daughter just got braces, and we were going to have to lay him off. So, I knew that there had to be a better way of managing properties, and this was not it. And that was honestly, that was such a big, I knew I always wanted to start my own company, my own company. But this was an aha moment. I looked to the guy upstairs and said, you did not put me on this earth.
What will you have me do? Yeah.
Right. To do this, to lay all these people that have given their hearts and souls. And so with that, my wife and I, we looked at all of our finances. And I took my entire life savings and I started our company, and I had roughly about a 4-year or 5-year burn rate with a plan together, and I started hiring people, and I didn't pay myself for the first 4 years.
Wow.
And I started burning through our life savings, and that's how we got started, and learned a lot. That's why I say I learned probably more in my 40s than any other decade in my life.
It's an important time to do it.
Yeah, and made lots of mistakes and learned from those mistakes, and put fire extinguishers wherever there was a mistake, and make sure that they didn't rear their ugly head again.
Yeah.
And
fabulous.
that's how we got started. We started that way in 2009.
Right, and 10 years later now, how many employees and how many properties?
So right now we have 425 employees.
Wow.
We have 10 properties that we have either a piece in or ownership, or we manage.
Right. So you do both, right? Both ownership as well as manage. Yeah.
And we do, I would say, in 2013, 14, we launched the hospitality component of our business. So we have Up to Par and Taylor Hospitality, and actually Taylor Hospitality is 70% of our portfolio.
Wow.
So we're stronger in we love golf, and I have a passion for golf and for clubs. But we have grown the hospitality component of our business more so than the golf side of things.
That's awesome. And is that catering, or are you doing specific events and so forth? Tell me a little bit about what hospitality means to Up to Par.
So we manage boutique hotels, restaurants, bars, event centers. So like we have one of our properties is the Virginia International Raceway. We take care of all of the hospitality for the raceway. Like a couple nights ago, we fed Lamborghini. All the executives for Lamborghini and for Maserati, and 2 weeks ago we fed 1,300 from Mount Mazda that was there for the race. Right, yeah. So we have boutique hotels, resorts.
Yep.
And that's the hospitality side of it. And it's actually been a nice augmentation and support structure for the clubs, because from the club end, almost 90% of the clubs across America, you can't get a good cheeseburger in. And so, it's, ironically, we have found ourselves that we have gotten into clubs more from the food and beverage side than the golf side.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
They
so they lose money hands over fist with the food and beverage, and we figured out how to make money in food and actually be profitable, and turn that profit over back to the club.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, tell me about how your leadership styles evolved over that time, Sean, particularly during those tough, first 4 or 5 years to where you are today.
Great question. Very much a doer.
Hmm.
You had to be the doer of the deeds.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
at that time, I essentially hired as the best people that I could afford to do
Mm,
the roles that I didn't have the greatest competency in to be able to do.
right.
Um, and however, sales I did. At one time I did, it was a one-man show, with everything. And then over the course of time have been able to add really good people as we have grown and become more profitable and continue to reinvest and invest
Yeah.
back into the organization, to the point where at least now we have a solid senior team that's driving the strategy and the execution
Yeah.
of the company as well as the properties as well. Very much more into the minutia and the details, because
Mm,
every account that we had mattered to, not that it doesn't matter now, but
right.
I had if anything, I probably um, was too much involved with the
Mm,
details at that
right.
time.
Right.
But over the course of time, you see your role changing, and you see where you need to step back and let other people delegate the responsibility. And while you may still be accountable for it, you're delegating that responsibility to get things done.
Right.
And big believer in, um, not so much managing as just as much as supporting our teams.
Right.
We don't, in our organization, we don't have what's called direct reports. We actually have direct supports. So whoever,
I like that.
so we're trying to support the people that are really the field, or out there in the field, and doing the job that needs to be done
Right.
for the guest and for the client. So
Yeah. Yeah.
so it has changed. It definitely has changed, and it has evolved. And I continue to think that it will continue to change and continue to evolve over the next 2 years and next
Yeah.
3 years.
Right.
Several years back, we did introduce lean management and Six
Oh,
Sigma
great.
into
Yeah.
our organization. I think we're one of the very few hospitality organizations that are out there that live and die through Six Sigma and
Yeah.
lean management. And being able to look through the lens of the customer has really opened up lots of opportunity for us to continually improve and get better, and not so much place blame on anyone, or as much as everything is broken down more or less into a process, and then we
Right.
coach to that particular
Yeah.
process.
Awesome.
Um,
Share
so
with me your thoughts a little bit about building a company culture. You've built this business from the ground up. It's been over 10 years, and touch on kind of what's unusual or unique about Up to Par.
so and that has you as the owner and as the CEO,